Hello everyone, welcome to a new Process Mining Café. Today the topic of our Process Mining Café is forensics. So how can process mining be used for forensic analysis? And I'm joined here today by two guests, Lucas Vousten and Vincenzo Salden from the IT security team at Joanknecht. Hi Vincenzo, hi Lucas.
Hi Anna.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, and welcome also you, viewers behind the screen, and thank you for joining us as well. As always, you can join the discussion and talk with us while we are on the air. So this is very easy to do. It's just below this video. You find a chat that you can enter without any password or account or anything. You just type your name. You press the button and you're in the chat, and throughout the session we will keep an eye on the chat, and we'll pick up your notes and questions and comments while we are talking and discuss them. All right, so let's get started. I think it's a very interesting topic that we have today, and I'm very happy to have you here, Lucas and Vincenzo, because you have an interesting case that you brought to us, a forensics case that we will dive into in the second half of the session today. But in general, right, process mining is often used for process improvement, sometimes also to support auditing use cases. But I think IT security is kind of a new and not so common use case for process mining. So, maybe can you start by giving us a little bit of an overview about what the typical IT security questions are that you deal with in your team?
Well, it's a broad broad spectrum of all kinds of questions that come to us and arise from clients from us. First of all, thank you for inviting us to join this cafe. We're very, very happy to give you and your viewers an overview of what we have come up with in the last few months. But regarding your question, IT security is a broad spectrum. It's not only about hacking and ransomwaring, which we come up with in the next hour, but there's a broad spectrum of measures that can be taken to prevent attacks, to prevent security issues, to prevent. It mainly focuses on three levels: on confidentiality of information, integrity of information, and the availability of information and systems. And those three, the CIA, is always very important to have in scope and to be able to know which parts can be prevented, which preventive actions can be taken to prevent an attack or something that has impact on confidentiality or integrity or availability.
You just said CIA, so CIA stands for confidentiality. What are the other two?
Integrity and availability.
And availability, yes.
The confidentiality of information and systems. Are people able and are they allowed to see the information which lies beneath? Is the information still in integrity? So is it changed? Can it be changed? Is it possible for them to change, or aren't they allowed to change it? And are systems still available? So the DDoS attacks that are performed by some parties, they will crash down the sites or crash down environments, and so the data is not available.
That's a denial of service, right? Attack when someone is calling a website, for example, so often that the website is not available anymore.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what you're describing, so what I see is that there's a much more awareness in the past years, like also created by GDPR perhaps. So that's of course more emphasizing the privacy aspect of the data, but still, people have been more accustomed now to actually make an audit, for example, of the kind of information they have, and that includes also how secure that information is. Do you see a change there too?
Well, we see a change and more awareness because of GDPR, which is in place since 2018 in the entire European Union. The General Data Protection Regulation. It's mainly focusing on privacy issues, which I'm not. It is focusing on privacy issues, but there's no word of privacy in the General Data protection regulation.
Yeah.
So I always see it in a broader perspective. You should focus on information security, and if that's arranged in the right way, then also the privacy matters are also in that part. So see it on a broader perspective. Then you include also the information security matters as well as the privacy matters.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So maybe one question that I have for you, Vincenzo, is like, what are some of the common errors that companies make, or what do they underestimate when you, for example, work with a client and you look at their data and make an audit?
Personally, I think that, and it was much bigger a few years back, but that it will only happen to other companies and not to themselves. Yeah. So then they are thinking like, oh, it won't happen to me, so we don't really have to put some time in protecting our data or protect our systems until it's too late, and then they got attacked or something like that, and they learned, and then it's like a top priority to keep everything safe. So that's,
and then it's too late.
Then it's already too late.
Yeah.
In addition to that, Vincenzo, in my opinion, also that companies lack a good awareness of their crown jewels.
Yeah.
Which is not only part of the customer data, but also IP, so intellectual property, drawings of machines or whatever. Your crown jewels, what are they, and where are they stored, and who's able to access them?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also relevant for process mining, right? For in terms of data privacy and who's allowed to see which data and how to make sure the data doesn't get leaked somewhere where it shouldn't be seen. So I think also as a process mining analyst, that's important. And we even had a separate session about that topic a few months ago. Maybe we can link that again in the show notes, which was specifically about privacy, security, and ethics. In the process mining context, but very much focusing on privacy and ethics and not so much the security part. But I think it's an element of that, right? And so one interesting question is then how process mining can actually help in kind of an IT security context. And so one thing that, when people ask or get the idea, I think it's pretty clear that process mining cannot really help in actual fraud detection, right? There's kind of specialized kind of techniques. Often if there's some fraudulent activity happening on a bank account or on a credit card, the companies, they realize that before the owners. It's actually that's a story that happened to me at once. So it was just a new account I was opening. And then I received a call from the bank and they told me, there's some activities going on. And then you log in and you see some strange thing. There was no money on yet or anything. But somehow they had kind of captured the cards and the pins on the way, through the mail and kind of captured that. Yeah. So before I noticed anything was up, they already knew. So I think it's pretty clear. Process mining is not about that.
No, it's not about instant view of what's happening. It's an analysis afterwards about the process that is going on, or what was going on.
Yes.
And in my opinion, there's always a difference between static analysis of static data and process data. If you have a question that you want to a research question that focuses on static data, one should use the static analysis tools like Excel, for example, or even higher level static analysis tools. But as soon as more process data comes in place and you want to have you have a question which lies on the field of process analysis, well, you should use tools like process mining analysis. Use techniques and models.
Yeah, and in a typical kind of IT security audit, are there places where you use process mining?
Well, in the field we'll show afterwards, we've used it before for fraud detection, not the fraud detection, but the fraud analysis afterwards. Who took place, was sending mails from an account, which many people used that account, but who was really sending separate mails, individual mails in a fraudulent matter. So we saw afterwards, using the process mining technique, that someone was accessing the central mailbox, sending specific mails to a Gmail account, and we saw the different steps in the process, and we could pinpoint the crook, or what you name it, the guy who was doing it, on his IP address from where he was sending it. You can use it as a normal in Excel tooling, but using the process, you can really see what was happening afterwards. Yeah. So it can be helpful.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly what we want to focus on also in the session today, and why we call it forensics, right? The deed is already done; it's already too late in a way, but understanding what has happened is still useful. And process mining, is an ideal tool to visualize and to show the flow of things that really happened in the process. So, the question is, where can that happen? And you two have done an interesting project to explore and learn more about that. Should we dive into that experiment?
Perfect. Sounds great. Yeah.
So basically, we have a few slides to illustrate that a little bit. So if we bring those up, I think I have to maybe change the screen here. So let's go first to the slides. So it's basically about this kind of terrifying scenario, right, where basically a ransom attack happens.
It has happened. It happened. So
yes.
Well, everybody's scared. Everybody is scared of the picture as well. But what has happened and why did it happen?
Yeah,
and that's because it's all in the news, all in the media right now. In my opinion, everybody, you, I, Vincenzo as well. In the end, we will jump into this kind of fraud. Every company will have to deal with it.
It's really important to be prepared, right? Because I heard, could that be true that 20% of the Dutch companies have had some kind of incidents or some kind of issue with ransomware?
I've heard the percentage as well. I think that in the end, near 100% will have the effects of.
Yeah. Okay, the more relevant.
The more relevant, yeah.
Right.
And of course, you have to do a lot to prevent it. You have to have anti-malware, anti-virus solutions. You have to patch all your PCs and etc. to prevent an attack. Mm-hmm. But in the end, you never can prevent a real attack. No. Not 100%. Oh. So you have to be prepared to also communicate and to have other processes in place to react on an attack. It can be a ransomware attack, it can be a hack or whatever. But you have to be prepared that it has happened.
Yeah.
Now we want to know what happened before.
Yeah. And so understanding how it happens is then also a way to increase the chances to be able to prevent the attack. So that's why we're looking at one attack scenario here, right?
It often starts by email. Yeah, true. Yeah. It often starts with a phishing email or an email with a link in it, which a user can click on. Mm-hmm. Well, in the worst case, they get infected, and if the systems are not patched in the right way, the infection will lead to scanning all devices, and a good attacker will scan the entire IT environment to know which files are there. Is it a company? Is it a company with a good revenue? What amount can we ransom for in the end? What amount can they pay? Can I get elevated privileges, for example?
Yeah.
And as soon as that is done, they can start encrypting all the data and set the screen on the screen before to inform the people who are infected that they have to pay.
Yeah.
But it's
let's
not
say
ending there. It's not ending there.
No, because once you pay, it can happen that they want more, right?
They want more, or if you don't pay, they will come back to you and they place it on a website somewhere, and they try to blackmail you as well, or again, and you have to pay, for example, still, or you don't pay, but data will be exfiltrated in the scan phase and before encryption. So they can always try to blackmail you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really terrifying. Yes.
It is terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, yeah, like you said before, if we're looking at understanding what happened, we can do this in different places. So before you mentioned that actually looking at the emails that were sent, can maybe give some understanding of how the communication went or where something came from. But when we look at the kind of stages of attack, in your project you focused on this last piece, right?
Last piece, yeah, because the discovery and to gain a foothold that it is the file that will be used for encryption will be placed on the server or whatever. The exfiltration of data, that's all part of the path of contamination. But we just focus on the last part, deploy ransomware, and how it is deployed, in order to be able to view which files are attacked first, which folders are attacked first, in which order are different devices in a network infected.
Yeah. And what are you hoping, or were you hoping to learn from this exercise?
Vincenzo, what were we hoping?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question because, as we know, the attack already happened, so you will have all the data, and what you want to learn about it is how did it happen, because security, IT security will always be a cat and mouse game. You're always running after the attacker when he infiltrates your system. You want to learn from it and make sure that you can prevent it in the future. So that is what we were aiming for, to see if we can learn from such attack, and in this case it is the ransomware attack, and to see if it's possible to create obstacles or even solutions for the attack itself, and for in the future to prevent the attack in a whole, or even create difficulties for the attacker, so you can maybe cut it off during its process, or secure data so you don't have to pay a ransom to get all your data back.
Yes.
And besides that, there's also professional interest. Because since 2010, I'm using process mining techniques in all different ways. It's always focusing on compliance issues, segregation of duties, on more efficiency. What are the bottlenecks in the process? Purchasing to pay or order to cash. Well, this is completely different. It's a complete new field and complete new item that can be mined. So pure professional interest is also part of the deal.
Definitely, and it's really such an interesting application, and I've never seen it before anywhere else. So I think it's a first application to this specific type of scenario, and that's also why we said, well, we have to share this here in the cafe with the community. So basically, what we want to do in the session here today is to take you through the experiment that Vincenzo and Lucas have done, and really take you through the stages of how they approached this, right? Because the first thing that you did is that you actually set up a safe environment where you can create a ransomware attack yourself, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I have to emphasize, we didn't use real data. Well, we used the real data from the lab setup, but we didn't use real data from one of our clients that has been ransomware or a real situation.
No, so it's kind of a laboratory situation.
Situation,
yeah. So you created a ransom attack in the lab, to say. And you had two components, right? There was kind of a desktop and a laptop component. Can you just explain the setup a little bit?
Yeah. We created the virtual environment, so the safe lab environment, and we simulated a connection between a laptop and a Windows Server file system. So they were connected just like in a normal company would, where the laptop had access to the file servers, its files that has been shared. And in this scenario, the user had attracted ransomware and executed it from its system, which eventually spread over the two device network.
Yeah. Yeah, and you brought us some screenshots, right, to show how this then looked like when you ran the attack. So the first screenshot that I'm bringing up here is basically that's the desktop system of the user in the lab scenario, where before anything happens, right?
Yeah, so this is the screenshot of just a normal work computer, Windows 10 environment, and we see on the left side some few files, and everything is still A-OK, and this is just before the ransomware was executed.
Yeah, and then we have the next screenshot where it is in progress. So at the moment it's running, right?
Yeah, at the moment it's running, and it already has encrypted some files, as you can see on the left side of the desktop. You can see a duplication of the files, which are the white papers, as you can see. But the original files are still there, and in the downloads folder, the window that's up, there the ransomware was executed, and it created its own little base of operations, and it created different files that will be showed later when the ransomware has fully been executed.
Yeah, so then that's the end of the session, right?
Yeah. So when the ransomware was executed and it encrypted all the files that it could find, on the left side you can see that the original files of the zip file and the text document has been deleted by the ransomware, and only the encrypted version is left with some new files that the ransomware has added, which will eventually give you the little view that you saw about, hey, we encrypted your files, be ready to pay, because otherwise we will delete everything, and all your files are lost.
Yeah. And so you started it on the desktop, on the user machine, and without running it separately on the server, it still spread to the server, right? So we have a screenshot here of the server screen, so that's before anything happened. And then we have the screen also, like now it's in progress.
It's now in progress, the same view as we had with the PC.
And now it's finished.
And now it's finished indeed, yeah.
And just because it was connected between, in a normal working situation, desktop computers or laptops are connected to the network, and the network device is always connected to those desktops, and they will be added in the line of contamination.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, in the lab you have created the scenario. So the attack has happened and has finished, and everything is encrypted. So how did you then create the data that you need for the process mining analysis?
It was in the beginning a little bit playing with what data was available, but we eventually got all the data we needed with the use of some scripts that were written. If I'm correct, you have the scripts in the presentation, yeah?
Yes, we will show them here. Yes, so the first script is, we show it here now, but can you explain it for people who are not script writers themselves?
So the first script is a very simple one. What it does, it goes through each folder that exists on the system and checks every file if it was encrypted. With ransomware, that's pretty easy to determine, because it will have its own file extension, which in this case was the WNCry extension, which stands for the WannaCry. And when he found a file which had the WannaCry file extension, he added the location to a text file. And after that, we could run the second script. And the second script went through that file with all the locations and executed the so-called stat command from a Linux command line. And that command extracted all information from the file, which contained the name, when it was created, when it was last modified, who modified it, and from which device the file came. And with that information, he wrote it away in a text document, a CSV document, which is actually one long line, and every part is been separated by a comma. So that stands for comma separated values.
Yeah, so the output of these two scripts is the CSV file, which is then the starting point for the data analysis, right? And we can show that. So we have the different versions of the files that you created here. So let's look just at that's the first raw output that basically comes out of these scripts.
Yeah.
And so maybe can you take us through? The first is the name of the file, right? Yeah,
the first is the name of the file. The second is the size of the file. Then we have on the third is from which device the file came. Then we have our access user, so who accessed the file at last. The access date, so which time was it was last accessed. Our modified time, so which time it was last modified, and last changed as the change time. It also gives information about when the file was created, the birth time, but that's a little bit different with the from the Linux system and the Windows system, so it doesn't give any information. Fortunately, it was not needed for our data analysis. And at last, it will show the location, the folder in which the file was when it was encrypted.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and then you made a second file, which is basically just a kind of, if we close that a little bit, of a simpler version where you left out some details, right? So
we looked at what information do we really need to answer the question. We gave more information about how the ransomware worked. We dropped all the unnecessary columns and changed a little bit some of them. So we added a new column which indicates different runs to give a little ID to for the process mining tool later on.
Yeah, because this is one run, so you had one run through this ransomware scenario, but we can come back to this later, but you also had in your experiment, you ran the same attack multiple times. So then you actually have more runs number 2, 3, for example, and they can be used as the case ID. So the run is used as the case ID in a process mining sense, which means we have one very long case with a lot of steps that all belong to the same ransomware attack, right?
Correct.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and this data set, if I understand correctly, combines both the files that have been affected on the desktop computer, but also the server to which it has spread through the
that's a good thing to mention. It's the combination of the laptop and the server, the data that was generated, Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and then I think based on that, you made a third file, which is then the one that we are using for the process mining analysis, where you basically combine the date and time into a timestamp.
Yeah, so it's a little bit easier for the process mining tool to create a nice flow of how the ransomware went through the system, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have the first data set from this attack scenario with one case, one run. And this is what we can now import into Disco, right? So here we have the Disco screen.
Yeah.
And the run is the case ID. Then the file name is the activity name. And also the device. So the device is, what is this?
So the device is from which, if the folder or the file was from the PC or the server. So it's give a little bit more oversight when we're going to load it into Disco. So you can see directly from, all right, so it started at, for example, the computer and then went through the server without going into each separated little data set to see from where it came from.
Yeah. Okay. So the DC that's the server component.
Yeah. It's the domain controller, but that's in this case it's the server. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the timestamp configured as timestamp. It's very detailed, right? You have nanoseconds here even.
Yeah.
So this is good. So you can sort everything in the right sequence because this happens really fast, right? So it's doesn't always take time to go, depending on how big the files are, or what is influencing the speed. Is it the file size, or
it's the file size, and of course the power of your computer. When you have a really powerful computer, it will go faster, of course, than one with less computer power. But mostly the size of the files is really indication of encryption going very fast or very slow. That could change from milliseconds to minutes or even more.
Yeah. Okay, and then we have the path. So now let's import this file, and what we get is
too many activities.
Very detailed, right? Very detailed.
It's a very, very detailed oversight of every file that was changed by the ransomware and in which order. As you can see, it's just one line straight down. So you could see when you're going to filter a little bit on how it started on our PC number 1, and eventually we will go to DC1, our server. But if I'm correct, it was almost like 80,000 files that have been changed by the ransomware, so it's going to take a long time to scroll through all these cases.
Yeah, so this is nice to have, but it's not really useful yet, right? So
no.
How did you think about to make it more useful?
Lucas and I have sparred a bit between different ways to show our data. And we found out that it was way too detailed, and we have to go more on a bird view level and get more oversight in the general flow of the ransomware. And eventually we came to the idea to go more on a folder level than on a file-based level. So we will be checking when a folder was changed and not when a file was changed.
And it starts with one important part, asking the right question. That's always one of my themes when I talk to data analysis like Vincenzo. Always start with a good question. Whether it's Excel or process mining, doesn't matter. Always start with a good question, because if you don't ask the right question, you never get the right answer. So in this case, we asked us the question, what is the happy path of the ransomware? Can we reveal the path of contamination? Can we reveal the first attack point and who may have clicked on the phishing mail and starting the attacking process? But that's relevant. And if we want to know how the flow of the ransomware is through all the system files and folders, then we have to be more able to have the bird view that Vincenzo mentioned, and have to focus on which folders are in time encrypted. So that's the reason why we made a different view named folder level.
Yeah. So still looking at the path, but not on the detailed file level anymore, but basically one level up on the folder level. And we see the next version of the data here now, where the beginning is the same. We still have the run, the file. You have now the start and the end time, right? So how did you do that?
So we chose to create a start and an end time, and it basically says that the start time is the time when the first file got encrypted within a folder, and the end time is the very last file that gets encrypted in the folder. So this way we can see when a folder was hit by the ransomware, also how long it had taken to encrypt every file within the folder, but now we'll also be able to see if folders get encrypted in the same time, and if there's more that multiple encryptions can happen within the same time period, what we couldn't see with our last view on the file level.
Yeah. And then there's the path, but then you broke up the path here into multiple folder levels, right? So can you explain this?
So we have our true path first. That's the full path to the folder of our chosen. And then we split it up. So when you have lots and lots of folders, you can still have a very big data set. And maybe you want to easily filter within it to get that sweet spot of enough information to see a flow, but not too much so you drown into all the data. So we split all the folders and subfolders into different levels, as we call them. So we can easily filter them in and out within the process mining tool, within Disco, to easily get the sweet spot that we want without having to reload the data continuously and change it back into the text file and then reload it again. So it really makes it more convenient to work with the data.
Yeah. Let me highlight that once more, because I think it's a smart way to prepare the data, and maybe it could be a useful trick for others who, even in a completely different context, want to analyze data on different levels. Because if you don't choose like one level, but you keep it flexible, like Vincenzo has done here, you can import the data in different ways and import it on a high level or on a more detailed level, right? So, for example, here, if we're looking at this one folder, you can see it broken up in these different levels. The top level is the C, so it's on the C drive. Then the second level is that it's program data, so it's in the program data subfolder within the C drive. And then there's a Microsoft folder within the program data within the C folder, and so on and so forth. And now we can actually see the effect of that if we import this file in Disco. Well, you can choose which level you want to pick, right? So this is what Vincenzo just explained. So we still have the same situation. We have the run as the case. We still keep the file, right, as well?
If you want, you could use the file, but now we're more... as an attribute, but now we're focusing more on the folder itself.
Yeah, so we still keep the attribute that tells us whether it's on the server or on the desktop machine. Because, like you mentioned already, because we now have start and completion time, actually there are some of the folders the encryption is running in parallel, and so we will see parallel activities. But to see first a sequential view of the process, so what you can do in Disco very easily is just use one timestamp to see a sequential view of the process. So this is what we do first, because we want to see a sequential view first, and then we exactly get these different levels, right? Instead of using the full path like we did before, here we have these level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we could choose, for example, to include all of them. But here, for example, we have chosen not to include kind of 8 levels below. That's too detailed, but we have chosen, okay, let's include up to 5 levels of folders, and that's the level of detail. But you could also choose to say, well, I'm choosing level 1 or 2, so then it would be just C drive versus D drive. You would see kind of that level of interaction, but we want to see a little bit more detail, so we pick.
And the combination of the activity is then the device, so the DC or the PC, including the C, program files, data, etc.
exactly. So let's import that and let's take a look. And it's still big, but it's not as crazy anymore, right? So, so what can we see here? Should I pull up all the activities, or?
Yeah, well, they are all the activities. It still is a row of all the folders and probably files that have been encrypted, but you can also see the difference between the laptop that was used as a starting point and the file server. You just showed us last week a nice feature in Disco to see which folders were affected in the first run and when was the DC affected.
Yeah, so PC, that's the PC where it all started, right? We see Correct. That actually it starts with the PC activities, but when we say DC, so that's the server. Let's see where that comes into play.
It's only just below. Yeah. So the same, sometimes the same folders are affected because they exist on both the laptop as well as the file server. Mm-hmm. But the file server only reveals underneath in the last phases of the attack.
Yeah. And we can also see some looping, right? So actually, so it's coming back to what is this kind of the app data folder. So then it goes into subfolders from there, or how do you interpret this?
Maybe you, Vincenzo.
Oh, yeah. All right. So within the app data folder, the app data local folder, there are different subfolders. And you can interpret it that, for example, our local and then a folder 1, 2, and 3. And when maybe folder 1 has 3 other subfolders within, and subfolder 2 after the local has 1, and our third folder in the local folder doesn't have any subfolders. Mm-hmm. So it will loop back because it's done with one of the subfolders within the local and then continues to the next. So you get this little looping, as you say, within Disco. Mm-hmm. Because he already finished all the subfolders, the child objects within it, and then loops back to continue the encryption of all the other folders within the app data local folder.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And also one part that we fell into, we always saw, and that's normal because, I explain later, we saw that Windows folders were not encrypted, never. Yeah. So the C Windows folder, that's the system folder. If they would encrypt the system folder, the laptop or device won't work anymore. So you wouldn't be able to see this is where you have to pay, and that's the part of the deal that you should know where you should pay and how you should pay. So the file system is not encrypted ever, and that you can show also that in the path of destruction only file paths and documents, my documents and my videos and my music will be affected, and not the system folders.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. Yes.
But it's logical, but you can see and show it that it's really happening that way.
Mm-hmm. And did you know that already? And was it confirmed in this way, or is that something that you noticed basically by looking at the?
It was confirmed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so of course you go into also then confirming a little bit like what you already know and comparing it. Sure. One of the things that you were also checking was the time, right? So you went to the statistics, Lucas, you told me, and then you saw that it took 5 hours, and you immediately thought, that's
strange.
Long.
That's strange. That's too long, because we knew that it only took less than 1 hour, I believe. But why almost 5 hours? Well, it was simple, in fact, because we extracted the data a few hours after the infection took place, and immediately after that we accessed the system, new files were created, and those new files were encrypted as well. So that doesn't reveal the real time of the first infection. using the time filter, the time frame filter, we could filter out the outliers.
Yeah. So
and only focus on the first infection phase.
Yeah. So it started 11:45.
Yeah. Sure.
And then how long should we do it? Like 12?
Just 1 hour, or just one, even more, over 1 hour. Trim to the time frame, and we filter out the outlier. Mm-hmm. And now I can see it, right, because it's
57 minutes.
57 minutes. Well, that is exactly the time frame we saw in our first infection phase, mm-hmm. which was focusing on the laptop, and later on during the process it was also infecting the file server.
Yeah. And while looking at the time is now also an opportunity to bring back in the start and completion timestamps, right? Because if we have start and complete timestamp for, in this case, a folder that's being encrypted, then we can also measure how long that actually takes. So if we go back and actually bring back in that end timestamp here, also as an activity, as a timestamp, I mean. So then here we have to configure the patterns, the day, month, year, minute, seconds, and then
maybe even in the future you can add nanoseconds as well.
Nanoseconds. I think Java doesn't go further than milliseconds, but I don't know. Yeah. Okay, and we still keep the same level, right? So let's still keep kind of the up to level 5, but not further.
Sounds good.
So now we can zoom in and actually look at the timing information also.
The performance,
Yeah. Then we see what takes long.
What takes long, and you can look at different folders and why does it take so long, and you see that there are many files in that folder, or many files in subfolders of that folder. Mm-hmm. That could be the case, and that jumped us in the next question, because I always learned how to question 5 times why, and this is also one of the whys, because what if we could trick the ransomware into a file or folder which contains a lot of files, and maybe a lot of large files, that would take the ransomware just staying there, and give the defender the opportunity to have more time to detect the attack phase, and maybe to have the opportunity to limit the attack and to end the attack.
Yes. And did it always start in the same place? So were you comparing different runs to see if it always starts in the same place, or?
We have another data set, and that was our first try to see what we could learn. It's a pretty small one, so it's hard to say if it really always starts in the same folder, but we did really gain patterns within the data of folders that had looked like maybe a little bit more priority, or the way of how the ransomware works. Was it random? Does it has a particular pattern it uses? And personally, and I think I can also talk for Lucas at this point, that it was really interesting to see something like that, to really find a pattern and see how something so destructural behaves and how it works.
Yeah. And it was similar, but not exactly the same every time, right? It's not that you get exactly the same sequence, even on the same system, right?
No, not completely random, but there is a pattern that we could detect. I'm not sure, but I believe it started mainly at the My Documents folder.
I think we have one file with multiple runs. Maybe I can bring that up. That was one of the files from the earlier
stage,
experiments that you did. So here we see it's not just one case, but here we can see that there's actually 2 cases. In this case, it's 2 runs. So it's the version of the file with 2 runs. And we see already it starts in a different place, right? The one run starts with uses, what is it? Uses.
It is the desktop. It's a subfolder on the desktop that he chose, and the other one is the desktop itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are differences. And then, so if we would have even more, maybe if we have more runs, right? So we can also, if we look in the animation, here it makes sense to synchronize the start times, because we want to see them begin at the same time, right? Regardless on when the actual experiment actually happened.
Yeah.
So this is like with the synchronized start times, you run the animation from the same, and let's make it a little bit slower, because now we basically see two runs kind of in comparison, right? And we see how they actually go into different directions.
Yeah.
And then sometimes things go really fast, right? This is what we saw. So if it's small, it's fast, but then sometimes takes more time. But here also it goes different paths, right? Left and right, so it's a little bit.
Correct.
So what's the difference here? It's kind of...
Well, it's small. It's very small.
So once it's going into... it's a different...
It's more like system files from programs that's on the computer. Mm-hmm. So you can see now that it's not always the same, as we said before, and that there sometimes are some deviations, and sometimes we can see a bit more kind of patterns.
So here also we see it's the one run is in a different place and another one in a different. So even though it's the same structure of the files, it's taking different routes. So
and it started with exactly the same setup.
Yeah.
And we have always also 3-10 times the same setup, and there are differences then, but also a pattern that it started always with desktop files, my documents, my videos, etc. And later on it jumps to app data in the Windows directories.
Yeah. Okay, so that could be a strategy to have some really large files and put them in one of these high priority folders.
It might help for this kind of attack and this kind of ransomware, the WannaCry, which is pretty old right now, and it's developing in a fast way. But it could help. It could help. But even software and the malware specialists are becoming smarter and smarter. So the cat and mouse game Vincenzo mentioned is also the case here.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else that from this experiment that you have learned or that you want to investigate next with this?
We're not there yet that we will share the details from the analysis with the anti-malware and antivirus industry. But it's for us it was the new way of looking into other data than normal traditional financial data, for example. The fact that we have to be able to ask the right question up front, to enable us to give the right answer, is also emphasized us for this case. The ETL process, extraction, transformation, load, we had different levels. We had a level from the file level towards the different levels in the folders. Normally it's 80% of the time spent on process mining analysis is 80% is on ETL in my experience. In this case, even 90 or 95% of the time was spent on the ETL process. To find the right level in order to be able to give answer to the question up front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also it shows like how you can, by creating the data in a smart way, you can look at it on the right level on which you want to see it, right? The right level for the questions that you want to answer, and also that you can make yourself this flexible data source where you look at it on different levels actually.
And how to extract the right data. You have to be very creative to find event logs, because normally event logs are log files. Windows log files are embedded in Windows systems, but they couldn't be used. So we had to be very creative here in how to get the right data from, in this case, the file extension, the file the change dates, etc., using the stat command to create an event logs ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so sometimes, the data isn't there, but that doesn't mean that you can't create it in this way. That's
True.
I think a really nice example for that. It's I have one question from the chat that I want to pick up here also, and it goes kind of in a similar direction like what you have described. They ask, is it then an idea to place video, photos, documents in the system folder to avoid them to be encrypted? So you mentioned already, but is that kind of an advice that you would give to people?
It's not an advice right now, because we will be investigating if as soon as we detect a ransomware, could we replace or change the files to another file folder. Malware is developing in a fast way.
Yeah.
So it could be also the case that new malware will scan also the Windows systems for files that shouldn't be there, and that they will encrypt it also.
Yeah. So it should be a very short-lived advantage, let's say, if it's the one even.
Yeah. But for this part, we for the WannaCry virus, it could be the case. Yeah.
So in general, then maybe that's the good way to end. Also to again reflect on what can people then do to protect themselves against ransomware. So maybe that's
they can do a lot. They have to do a lot. They should do a lot. First of all, they have to start with a good risk analysis, know where the crown jewels are, have a good information security policy, have a good password policy as well, change passwords on a regular basis, have strong passwords, etc. Limit physical and logical access to files and folders and systems, and also even server rooms. Have adequate backup policies and test them in a periodic way, because if you have a good backup and that can be recovered in a timely manner, you can always go on with your business without paying. Well, we don't know if you will be blackmailed in the end, but you can always continue with your business. Yeah. Take care of installing the latest patches, because if you're running out of the latest patches, you have more attack surface that an attacker can make use of. Conduct a security assessment in a regular way, penetration testing, so like ethical hacking, etc. All kinds of measures that you could take up front to prevent an attack and to limit the impact of an attack.
Yeah. And of course, if I may add, be aware. So most of the time, in this case, ransomware is activated and been drawn into the system by the people themselves. So be aware yourself, but also make your employees and your family and your friends aware, and don't open everything, every link you get, or click on every picture, or open every file that you get sent if you don't know from who it is or what it could be, because that's more often than not the way that people get attacked with viruses and ransomware or malware.
Yeah, it's really a level of education, right, that is required today to use a computer.
People are always a weak chain.
Yeah,
we always are. But there are three items, and besides the human factor, technical factors, which I mentioned as well, and procedural aspects. So have the right procedures in place to prevent, to detect, and to react on possible attacks.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, this is, I think, a great way to close this, with these things in mind, so everyone maybe has this as a reminder to see where they could do more or be more careful and more protective. I think the application is a really interesting, really creative one for process mining. So thank you both for coming on here to the Process Mining Café and sharing that with the community. It was really great to see. I think some of the things we could take away from in a general way also for other types of process mining analysis, like we just mentioned creating data in a creative way, but also preparing it flexibly and looking at it from different angles. Thank you both for joining today.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our experiment with you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, thanks again, and thanks all of you for watching to this edition from Process Mining Café. We will be back in 1 month with a new Process Mining Café about simulation. See you then. Bye bye, everyone.